Hello everyone, and welcome back to English Stories with Sidz, where every story touches your heart and helps you grow your English at the same time. Today, I want to ask you something very personal. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like nobody noticed you were there? Have you ever raised your hand and nobody called on you? Have you ever tried your best and still felt completely invisible? If your answer is yes, then today's story is especially for you. So take a deep breath and let us begin. Once upon a time, in a small, busy school in a quiet little town, there was a boy named Eli. Eli was 11 years old. He had soft brown eyes, messy hair that never stayed combed, and a slightly too big school uniform that made him look even smaller than he already was. He was not the loudest student in the class. He was not the smartest. He was not the funniest or the most popular. Eli was simply there. Every morning he walked into the classroom, took his seat at the very back, opened his books, and waited. He waited to be noticed. He waited to be called on. He waited for someone, anyone, to look his way. Nobody ever did. His teachers called on the bright students in the front row. His classmates laughed and played with the popular ones at recess. In group projects, nobody chose Eli. He was always the last one assigned to a group, like an afterthought, like a spare piece that did not quite fit anywhere. He never complained. He never made a scene. He simply sat. He simply waited. He simply disappeared a little more each day. At home, his mother would ask, "How is school today, Eli?" And Eli would always give the same answer, "Fine." Because how do you explain to someone that you spent an entire day surrounded by people and felt completely alone? How do you explain that the hardest kind of loneliness is not being alone in an empty room, but being invisible in a full one? Eli did not have the words for that, so he just said, "Fine." Then one gray Monday morning, everything changed. A new teacher walked into the classroom. Her name was Miss Hannah. She was young, warm, with bright, curious eyes that seemed to look at everything just a little more carefully than most people do. On her very first day, she did something that no teacher had ever done before. Instead of starting the lesson immediately, she walked slowly around the entire classroom and looked at every single student. Really looked, one by one, taking her time. When she reached the back of the classroom, she stopped. She looked at Eli, not past him, not through him, at him. She smiled, a small, warm, genuine smile, and said, "I do not think I know your name yet." Eli blinked. He looked behind him to make sure she was not talking to someone else. She laughed softly and said, "Yes, I mean you. What is your name?" "Eli," he said quietly, almost a whisper. "Eli," she repeated, as if she was memorizing it, as if it mattered. "I am very glad you are here, Eli." 5 words, just 5 ordinary words, but to Eli, they felt like sunlight after a very long winter. Over the following weeks, Miss Hannah did something quietly extraordinary. She watched. While other teachers looked at test scores and raised hands, Miss Hannah watched what students did when they thought nobody was looking. And what she saw in Eli quietly amazed her. When the class was given a creative writing assignment, every other student wrote 1 page. Eli wrote 7, filling the margins with tiny, detailed drawings that illustrated every scene he had written. When the class discussed his story, Eli never raised his hand, but she noticed his lips moving slightly, as if he was having the entire conversation inside his own head. When a younger student dropped all her books in the hallway, every other child walked past. Eli stopped, quietly picked up every single book, handed them back without saying a word, and walked on. Miss Hannah saw all of it. One afternoon, she kept Eli behind after class. He stood nervously in front of her desk, certain he had done something wrong. But Miss Hannah simply placed his creative writing assignment on the desk in front of him, all 7 pages, and said, "Eli, Who taught you to write like this?" Eli stared at her. "Nobody," he said. I just write what I see in my head." Miss Hannah leaned forward and looked at him very directly and said, "Do you know what you are, Eli?" He shook his head slowly. She said, "You are not invisible. You are just quietly extraordinary, and the world is going to hear from you one day, whether it is ready or not." Something shifted in Eli that afternoon. Not overnight, not dramatically, but slowly, the way a flower opens, quietly and completely in its own time. He started writing every single day, not for school, not for grades, just for himself. He filled notebook after notebook with stories, with observations, with the tiny, beautiful details of the world that nobody else seemed to notice. He started raising his hand in Miss Hannah's class, quietly at first, then more, then confidently. He started sitting a little less at the back. He started taking up just a little more space in the world. And the boy who had spent years disappearing, slowly, beautifully, began to appear. Many years later, Eli became a writer. Not just any writer, a writer whose words reached millions of people around the world. People who read his books and wrote to him saying, "Your words made me feel seen for the first time. I thought I was invisible until I read your story. How did you know exactly what I was feeling?" And Eli always smiled when he read those letters, because he knew exactly how they felt. He had been there. On the last page of every book he ever wrote, Eli always included the same 3-line dedication. It read, "To Miss Hannah, who looked at the back of the room when everyone else forgot to." And so, my dear friends, the story of Eli and Miss Hannah teaches us 2 beautiful lessons today. The first lesson is for anyone who has ever felt invisible. You are not invisible. You are not too quiet, too small, or too ordinary. You are simply waiting for the right person to look. And more importantly, you are waiting for yourself to look. Your gifts are real. Your voice matters. The world needs what only you can offer. The second lesson is for all of us. Look at the back of the room. Look at the quiet ones. Look at the ones who never raise their hand, because sometimes the most extraordinary people in the world are simply waiting, patiently and silently for someone to finally say, "I see you. I'm glad you are here." Those 5 words can change a life. They changed Eli's.